Hi, I'm Rick Richardson, and welcome back to the Salary Step Up series. This is step 10, and it's actually the second part of the negotiations phase. Now, the steps 9 and 10 deal with the negotiations, and in this step, in 10, we're going to talk more about the strategies and the tactics that you can employ. Now, first of all, we want to get the right frame of mind. And in step 9, I mentioned that you want to know who you're negotiating against and also what your goals are and what you want to accomplish in your negotiations. So let's start with that part first. Understanding what you want is best done by building your negotiations. And this is your presentation is also built on this, around your goals. So in going into a negotiation, you want to clearly define what your objective is. Now, you've already done that because you know what you've done your presentation on. So what we're going to do to take this one step further is to define what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable to you by using your goals to define that. When you're making your presentation and you're asking for all of the things that you wish to obtain, some of those may not be as important to you as others, and therefore you're willing to concede those in negotiation in order to maintain the ones that are most important. Make sure that you've done this in advance and clearly thought this out in relationship to your long-term goals. So this has a lot to do with evaluating it to your lifestyle, your career goals, and all of that. So when you're involved in the negotiation, you won't have to question yourself as to what's most important to me. You'll have already done that, and therefore your thinking will be clearer and more focused on what is the most important to you. That leads me to the next part, which is to know when to walk away. Your power in any negotiation is always to walk away, to end the negotiations. And when you have this in your thinking before you go in, it gives you a sense of strength that you can project in the negotiations. Now, this isn't to be heavy-handed and to say it's my way or the highway kind of thing. This is in order to have a very clear mind when you go into it and say, look, I know that if this does not work out for me, I'm okay with leaving this negotiation, potentially leaving the job. And that strength that you derive from knowing that you hold the ultimate power is what I want you to really sink that into you before you go into the negotiations. So prior to the presentation, you are evaluating all of your goals and all your request items, and you're having a very clear picture. In preparing for the negotiation, you take it one step further and you make it really clear in very defined terms. This much money is what I'm asking for, this much money is acceptable, this much money is not acceptable, that kind of thing. Very clear in your thinking so that you know exactly what you're willing to concede, where your walk-away point is, where your acceptance point is. So this part is where we're going to think about what your boss wants, what the company wants, and what you're willing to do in order to provide to them what their ultimate best case scenario would be. So when you're involved in this process, it probably is revealing some of the things where there might be a particular task that's not getting done well. Your boss may have even asked you to handle it at times, things that put more pressure on your boss at particular times of the year, and this might be their opportunity to say, hey, I want you to take this task on. I'll give you your pay raise, but I want you to take on some more responsibility, some more work, and you need to be thinking ahead and seeing what those might be. And are those acceptable to you? If there's something that you go, yeah, no problem, I'll do that. If I can get everything I want, I'm happy to do that. That's a perfect win-win. You might even propose that if you feel it's necessary to push them over the hump, to get them to say, yeah, okay, we can justify this if you're taking on more work and you're alleviating some of the pressure that we have in other areas. Let's say it's the other way. It's a task that you don't like doing. It's something you don't feel furthers your career. It doesn't fit in well with what you do. It's something that you're uncomfortable with. It's not in your expertise. Whatever it is, you need to be able to say no to that when they bring it up in the negotiation. So they say, look, we'll give you everything you've asked for, but we need you to take on this task. And you say, no, it's just not acceptable to me. I will not take on that task for this. And here's why. And you make it clear that you're not the right person for that task, but you are very much the right person for the current tasks and those that you have delineated that you're willing to proceed with. So you want to make sure that you have given a little forethought, and before the negotiations, before the presentation, again, negotiation and presentation kind of intermingle here, and you have laid out the facts. Now, in your presentation, it may not make sense to say, oh, by the way, you'll probably want me to do this, so I want to just tell you right now I'm not going to do it. That's not where I would use it, and I think that it could definitely set the wrong tone to your presentation. Having it prepared so that you are ready to go in the negotiations with that and say, I just am not the right person, here's why. So that may come up in several different things. It may not be one big task that they want you to take on, or a particular job, or showing up an hour early to handle whatever. If it comes in bits and pieces, let's say it's just more of a general, okay, we can do this, but we want you to take on some more responsibilities. If they cannot define those responsibilities, you need to make sure that you're defining them with them. So if you're saying, okay, well, I'm willing to accept some more responsibilities, some more things that we throw into what my job description is, but I need to be able to put that in black and white. I need to be able to measure it, and I need to be able to tell you that I am comfortable knowing that I'm the right person to do this work and that I'm able to deliver the goods. So as you're doing this negotiation, have a forethought to what they might ask you to take on, and then if there's something that is thrown out to you that you haven't given thought to, but it's a appealing thought to you at the time they make it, you're able to say, okay, your mind is not occupied with all this other stuff. You've already put that to bed before you walked in. You now have the mental resources available to drill down and say, okay, what is it that you want me to accept? And you will already have a very clear focus on your goals and what your intent is with this overall process to not only your pay raise, but with your career. And you will be able to clearly see where this other element is going to fit in. And if it doesn't, it's a no. If it does, yes. And it might even bring up something that you can then ask for even more than what you've asked for in your presentation. So let's think about what the other side would hate to have happen. If you know that they would hate to have you leave, they would hate to set a precedence in the sense of, if we give you this pay raise, there's 18 other people that do the same work that you do, and they're all going to flood in here and all want a pay raise. You need to think about those objections that they're going to throw up, and you need to make sure that you have a response on hand ready to go. You may not need it. You may not have any reason to put it out there to your boss, but you have it if the opportunity comes up, if the need comes up. So make sure that you've given some thought, and this is in using like a perspective shifting process in getting into their head, and other steps deal with that. So I want you to be really clear as you're designing your presentation. You may pre-design it to show what you have put into the presentation that is going to address their concern. that's in the pre-design of it, in the presentation, it is pre-designed to handle the negotiation aspect of it. Some of these things fit really well, some don't. It's important that your presentation be clean, concise, and impactful. But what we want to make sure is that you also have the information, the knowledge of what you think their biggest fear is going to be, what they would hate to have happen. It may not be that they're afraid of losing you, but a fear of causing an exodus. If you leave and you go to a competitor and that competitor is willing to give you the pay, in fact, they're willing to take on a whole bunch of your co-workers at your current job and bring them over and give them more of what you've asked for, knowing that you would be the one that would be able to lead that exodus. If that's a potential fear of your employer, make sure that you are prepared to not threaten with this, but to imply that things just stay moving along smoothly and that there's no interruption with the entire workforce, especially if you're a key person in the workforce, if you're a leader or you're well respected amongst your peers. Those types of fears that your employer is going to have will become really apparent if they see that you are someone who has all of your information laid out, all of the facts are very clear. They can see from a logical perspective that your argument is fact-based and it's reasonable. Then, by some subtle implications, that you know that the competitors are hiring. In fact, you know that they're hiring a lot of people. In that, the implication is that your whole department's going to walk. But you could be a nice anchor to maintain the continuity in the company by making sure that if you stay and you're happy, that you can help keep the other people there and keep them happy. All right, let's talk about the give and take. This is the aspect of the win-win approach to this negotiation. If you are prepared to give up on some of the items that you've had and you're finding resistance right away, you could lead with a slight concession. Again, this is where you have pre-thought your negotiation process. So you're finding some resistance. They're saying that we just can't afford this. We can't do these things. You might be able to say, well, look, this item here, I'm willing to take half of that. And that slight concession, and this is hopefully your smallest item. This is the one that you care the least about, although it would be nice to have. It's also something that maybe fits in really well with phasing in. You could say to them, well, I could live without this for 3 months, and then in 3 months we'll get half of it, and then in about 9 months we'll phase it in fully. If you're having some resistance from your boss, a proposition to them in the negotiation like that will help them to understand that you're involved in this negotiation to find a reasonable and equitable solution that it works for both sides. So having something that you can give them that's not a big thing, but it shows that you're involved, is really important in setting the tone. Now, there's another tone that goes along with that you don't want to set. That is a big concession and a continuation of concessions before they've given you something. So if someone that I'm negotiating with has just been overwhelmed with it and they say, I just can't see how this is going to work, it's just too much. I take my smallest item, the one I'm willing to give up, and I give up a piece of it. And I say, I'm willing to give up a piece of this, or I'm willing to phase it in later, or I'm willing to delay it, whatever it is. And if I don't get something back from them, then I do not want to give them more. If they're not going to give me something in return to what I gave them, and it doesn't have to be a lot. I just have to see some sort of reciprocity, that tit for tat, that I give you something, you give me something, we'll work it out. That's where you tend to get people who want to negotiate to the middle all the time. Not a good way of thinking about negotiation. My thinking is, though, we can meet in the middle emotionally. We can meet in the middle with integrity and with a determination to find common ground and respect each other. That doesn't mean that if I'm asking for $1,000 and you say $0, we meet at $500. That's not the middle I'm talking about. So keep in mind that you are working back and forth, but even though you're talking about dollars, it's not to come down halfway. It's to show movement, show that you respect them and you respect the process, and that you're going to work together to find that common ground, that give and take. Have it clear in your mind what you're going to do to offer up give and takes. The next part is to understand what they want in the negotiation process. Now, this isn't just the anticipation of what they want. Now we're looking for them telling us what they want and how we can get what we want. This is where we're going to start reading the body language. We're going to listen very clearly to their objections. This is why we want to get all of the objections, all the concerns at one time. We want them to tell us what it is that their big concerns are, what their fears are, and what we're going to have to do to get what we want. Now, we're going to listen to what they say, but we're also going to listen to how they say it, and we're going to listen to, well, I guess it's not listening, we're going to watch the body language. We're going to interpret the emotions that are being conveyed, the facial expressions, those types of things. So, while they're telling us how to get what we want, they are going to say something to us, their objection. But how they say the objection is going to infer the emotion behind it. So if they say something and the emotion behind it is fear, you have to then think further into it. What is it about this that they fear? How can I use that fear to my advantage? Now, a lot of people get hung up in the negotiation because they feel at this point you're going to take advantage of someone, or you're trying to manipulate them and you're doing something underhanded. That's not the case. What you're really doing is you are understanding that if they have a fear, what is the fear? You can intensify that fear and then alleviate the fear. Here's the thing. If you had to go to the doctor and they said you have to get a shot, and the doctor tells you, yeah, this shot can really hurt a lot. And then, I mean, this doesn't really happen, at least with my doctor, and then they give you the shot and it doesn't really hurt. Because of the anticipation and because it didn't hurt, your feelings about that shot right afterwards are much more pleasant. Oh, it wasn't so bad. But if they say, this doesn't hurt at all, and they give it to you, and it just has a little bit of pain, a little sting when they give it to you, you'd say, they lied to me. I don't feel good about this. It hurt, and they said it wouldn't hurt. See, so if you set the perceptions, it works to your advantage. So we're doing that in some of the presentation stuff, but in this particular phase, as they tell you what their objection is, as you understand that, you see what words they've used, and you see that there's a little fear with this, or there's no fear with this, or it's very clear. They're looking at the numbers. Now, we know there's going to be emotions behind those numbers, and so we're going to have to find that, and we're going to use that to our advantage. But as you find those things, it's okay to ratchet up the fear. But at that point, if you can then put the fear back into it, you can ratchet up that emotion. So you're playing a little bit, you bring them back down, then you're going to ratchet it back up, and you say to them, but if I don't get what I'm looking for, I'm willing to leave the company, not because I want to, but because I need to, because it's my job to get paid what I'm worth and to provide for my family and to progress my career and do those things at a place where I'm appreciated. I need to feel good about my work, and I need to feel good about the people I work with. I do feel good about my work here. I do feel good about who I work with here. But if I'm not being paid what I need to be paid, I do have to leave. All right, so you understand that you can bring them down, you can take them back up. That fear then is now heightened, and they understand there is a line that they don't want to cross. They don't want to lose you. So you've impressed upon them that you're willing to work with them, and you do the give and take, and that's that emotional give and take you work with. Okay, so we've talked about how you're being respectful and polite to your boss. There is a tactic that the bosses tend to throw back a lot, and that is they will try to use your values, your integrity, your good nature against you. Now, I have a real problem with this, although it is something that I'm not going to say I wouldn't use it in negotiation, but I am offended a little bit by it when it does happen. That sounds like I'm on both sides of this, and you'll understand what it is. Do not let your integrity and your values be used to negotiate against you. Let me give you an example of this where it happens a lot in society. If a debt collector was to call someone, and hopefully that's never you, hopefully it's not me, but here's the thing with debt collectors. They will call and they will be your friend, and they will tell you, hey, we really want you to, we want to help you here. And we know you're a good person, and we know you're an honest person, and it's really important. So what we want you to do is, can you just give us a payment? Now, they push on your buttons that are, you have high integrity, you're a respectful person and everything. You're not a deadbeat. You're not one of those people. You're one of those people who does the right thing. So think about that same type of perception when it's done in a negotiation with your boss. Your boss says to you, you know, I really appreciate you. You have such high integrity. You're such a good hard worker. You give so much to the company. Why do you come to me and do this to me? Why do you put me in this position? Why are you trying to be greedy? Why are you asking for all this stuff? Can't you just be happy with what you have? Don't you know we've given you all that we can give you, and we can't give you any more? If I could, I would. So why are you coming to me and making me feel bad? Why are you doing this to me? So if your boss is doing something like that and they're trying to push on your emotions, they're trying to push on your integrity, you need to recognize that for what it is. That is a negotiation tactic that you need to just shut it down. Now, you can shut it down a couple different ways. You can ignore it, or you can do one that I like to do. Here's what and I'm not saying I don't like to do the ignoring part. I do that. That's more like just a silence tactic. But what I like to do is say, I really appreciate that you recognize me as somebody with high integrity and strong values, but I won't let you use my integrity and strong values against me. You see, I'm here because I have strong values, high integrity. I think it's important that a worker be paid what they're worth, that they're respected not just in how they're talked to and the work environment, but also in the size of the paycheck. That's reasonable that if that paycheck's not commensurate with the work, if they're not being given a fair wage, and fair is obviously determined between the two of you here, that fair wage is, if it's not there, the implication is that the boss does not respect you. So you've reversed it and you've thrown it back on them, and you've told them, look, I am a person of high integrity. I appreciate that you've recognized that with me. And now I want to point it out that the way you're approaching me about this is a little less than what I'm approaching it with. So you try to stop them by pointing out, you know, I really like you, but you're going down a road that I don't think you really want to go down. You want to stop that, and you need to talk with me about what we can accomplish here, and you shouldn't try to berate me or belittle me or use my integrity against me. All right? How much of that you do with more force, more in your face kind of approach has a lot to do with your boss's personality. If your boss is someone who won't recognize it when you just say, oh, thank you for recognizing my integrity, but this is still a reasonable request within my value system, and your boss continues down that road, you need to push a little harder. You need to put it right in their face if needed, that you will not be treated that way. You will not have yourself used against yourself. There's a tactic I love to use, and it's educational negotiation. And the reason I like to use it is that when I do a presentation about something, I like to do it in a very educational process. I like to teach the person that I'm presenting to, here's what your problem is. That's why we're sitting here. Here's how I'm going to solve your problem. And this is how this is all going to come about with you doing it, me doing my part. We end up with a resolution. And that's this educational process. And sometimes that involves giving them a little background, a little history, a little more education. That's why I use the educational process, is because you can bring in some of these different scholastic types of ways of thinking about it. Again, with history and math and science, whatever it is, and you explain those elements to them, and it brings them to a conclusion. You do that in negotiations the same way, but you're building off of the presentation that you've already given. So in the negotiations, you may just go back and reiterate something that you had presented to them previously, or you expand on it. Again, I've told you in the presentation process, you do not want to get too many details and lose the flow and the concise, tight nature of the presentation. So in the negotiations, you want to be able to expand on it if it's necessary. If their concerns are, yeah, we heard you say this, but we just aren't convinced, so you convince them with education. And the reason you use the educational approach is it's non-confrontational. You're not saying, if you don't give me this, I'm walking. You're saying, let me explain to you why this is reasonable. Let me explain to you why this should happen this way. I don't think you understand exactly how much work this takes. I don't think you understand how I am the right person. Now, those types of phrases may not be appropriate. The I don't think you understand part of it. What I'm saying by saying you don't understand is explain to them, using a phrase something more like, I understand your concerns. Let me show you how I got to this point. Let me show you some more supportive information I didn't give you in the presentation, and I think you'll agree. That's more of what the kind of phrasing I'm talking about. Okay, now let's talk about leverage. And leverage in negotiation is anything you can use to bolster your position and move them from their position towards your position. This is why we have spent so much time observing our boss, learning about this, creating the atmosphere for the presentation, reshaping the environment, all of those different pieces, because all of those add up to little pieces of leverage. When you're pushing on your boss, you want to push them or lead them in a direction that works to your advantage, and understanding how you do that. And this is all of these I term as leverage. Everything's fair. Anything you can use against the other party in order to get more on your side is fair, as long as it doesn't violate your values and integrity. The fear of losing you would be a leverage. The idea that you are going to put more on their table, you're going to bring more results to the company if you get this, because you'll still be there, you'll still be producing, and you'll do more of what you've done in the past. Or they're giving you more resources to do more. or through the promotion, you can show them that you are the right person for the promotion and that you're going to deliver the goods, and you've shown them exactly why. You've presented those facts. All of that is leverage. I want you to be really clear in your thinking about leverage. Everything is available to you, whether it's pushing their hot buttons emotionally, whether it's facts that support your position. Any of that is leverage, and every element of that you identify as leverage, you write that down on your objectives page as something that you want to make sure you are clear about how you're going to use it. And again, a lot of this is about having clear thoughts designed before you sit down across the table. Sitting down across the table and running on the fly with this, just sitting down and saying, hey, I want another 10 bucks an hour, or I'm walking. It can work in some situations, but it's not the best way to do it. And unless your boss already agrees that you're the right person and all of that, because you haven't presented any of that, you've just said, I get it or I go, you've only given your boss one thing to work with, and that is you leave or I give them the money. So can I give them a little less money than they've asked for, or can I maybe just call their bluff and they stay? What I prefer to do is use several pieces of leverage. Some of it could lead to, or I leave, to encourage them to see that that pay raise is valid, and they've gotten to that decision in a series of steps that none of them were uncomfortable. So they've very methodically moved through your process. They didn't know they were moving through the process. You just led them through it. And those pieces of leverage, all different elements, are coming to fruition with the conclusion that you want. Much easier to get to, and the relationship moving forward is much more positive. It also leads you to having very clearly defined descriptions of your job description, very clearly defined goals for the next year, those types of things. Okay, so we're at the end of this step, and what I want you to have taken away from the negotiation steps is that you're going to be very clear about what pieces of leverage you're going to have thought out and prepared, and which ones are going to be in the presentation and which ones are going to be held in reserve if needed for the negotiation. The presentation you're keeping nice and tight and succinct, but with enough force. The best information is in that. Now, the information that doesn't fit in the presentation, you hold that back and you can use that in the negotiation. You can also revisit what was in the presentation. The next part is that you're really clear in your thinking about what you wanted to accomplish and what those goals are, why they exist in goals, because they fit into your lifestyle, your career plans. And then the next one is who you're negotiating against and what their fears are, what they want, what they don't want, all of those pieces. So when you walk into the presentation, and then you're sitting there and you're now negotiating, while you're negotiating, there's so much of your mental process is not used in making decisions. The decisions are already made. What you're doing is you're acting out with the information and the process to accomplish what your prior decisions are.